Bullies mock the new kid. Major mistake. He's a combat champion they'll never forget. The fluorescent lights of Westridge High School buzzed overhead as Ethan Chen kept his eyes fixed on the scuffed linoleum floor. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly before him, a gauntlet of stairs and whispers he'd have to navigate yet again. At 15, Ethan wasn't particularly tall for his age, just shy of 5'6", with a slightly chubby build that his mother called still carrying. Baby fat. His oversized hoodie hung from his frame like a shield, and his dark hair fell across his forehead, partially obscuring eyes that never quite made contact with anyone else's. It had been exactly 17 days since his family had moved from Singapore to this small American town. 17 days of being the perpetual outsider, the curiosity, the target. Back home, Ethan had been someone, respected, even feared in certain circles. Here, no one knew. No one had any idea. That was, precisely how his parents wanted it. Fresh start, his father had said firmly on the plane ride over. No fighting, no tournaments. Focus on school, make normal friends. His mother had nodded in agreement, adding, 8 years of training is enough. There's more to life than combat, Ethan. 8 years since his uncle had first brought him to the dojo at age 7. 8 years of daily training, of calluses and bruises, of learning to channel the quiet rage that had always lived inside him. 8 years culminating in becoming the youngest junior champion in mixed martial arts that Singapore had seen in decades. And now, nothing. Just another invisible kid in an American high school. The first warning bell rang, sending students scurrying to their classrooms. Ethan clutched his textbooks tighter to his chest and quickened his pace. If he could just make it to Mr. Peterson's physics class without, well, if it isn't Jackie Chan Jr. The voice came from behind, followed by snickering. Ethan didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Jackson Reed, tall, broad-shouldered football star and self-appointed tormentor, had made it his personal mission to remind Ethan daily of his outsider status. Ethan kept walking, his shoulders tensing instinctively. His instructor's voice echoed in his mind, center yourself, breathe from your core. Awareness precedes action. Hey, I'm talking to you, dim sum. Jackson's hand landed heavily on Ethan's shoulder, spinning him around with enough force to send his physics textbook clattering to the floor. Behind Jackson stood his usual shadows, Damon Meyer, built like a refrigerator with about the same IQ, and Tyler Williams, wiry and mean-spirited, always eager to impress Jackson with increasingly creative taunts. Sorry, Ethan muttered, bending to retrieve his book. It was the same routine every day. Apologize, keep your head down, don't engage. 8 national tournament medals sat in a box under his bed, and here he was, apologizing to a boy who had never faced a real opponent in his life. Solly, Jackson mimicked in an exaggerated accent. That sounded nothing like Ethan's barely there Singaporean lilt. Man, what is it with you? Don't they teach you to stand up for yourself wherever you're from? You have no idea what I've been taught, Ethan thought, but kept silent. Maybe he's waiting for his kung fu movie moment, Tyler chimed in, throwing a ridiculous mock karate chop in the air. Hi-ya! The small crowd that had gathered in the hallway erupted in laughter. Ethan felt heat creeping up his neck but kept his expression neutral. The second bell rang. He was officially late for physics. Just leave me alone, Ethan said quietly, turning to go. Or what? Jackson stepped directly into his path. What exactly are you going to do about it, Tubby? Ethan looked up then, making direct eye contact with Jackson for perhaps the first time. For a brief moment, something passed between them. Jackson's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, a flash of uncertainty crossing his face as he glimpsed something in Ethan's gaze. But the moment passed quickly, and Jackson's sneer returned. That's what I thought, nothing. Jackson shoved Ethan's shoulder hard, causing him to stumble back against the lockers with a metallic clang. Same time tomorrow, Bruce Lee. Maybe bring some of your mum's weird food for us to try. The trio sauntered away, high-fiving each other as they disappeared around the corner. The onlookers dispersed, the entertainment portion of their morning complete. Ethan stood alone in the empty hallway, his heart rate steady, his breathing controlled. 8 years of training had taught him discipline, if nothing else. He gathered his books and headed to class, already knowing the teacher would mark him tardy, already calculating that this was the 3rd time this week, already understanding that a detention slip would likely be waiting for him after. Class, this isn't who you are, a voice in his head whispered. This isn't who you're meant to be. But he had promised his parents. A fresh start, no fighting. So he pushed open the classroom door, apologized to Mr. Peterson for his tardiness, and slid into his seat amid snickers and sideways glances. Just another day at Westridge High. The cafeteria was a battlefield of social hierarchies, with clearly defined territories and unspoken rules. After 2.5 weeks, Ethan had learned to navigate it with the same tactical precision he once applied to the mat. He'd identified the optimal timing, arrived 7 minutes after the lunch bell when the initial rush had subsided, the safest position, corner table near the emergency exit, back to the wall, and the fastest escape route. Today, his calculated routine was disrupted when he spotted Lisa Nguyen sitting alone at his usual table. Lisa was one of the few students who had shown him any kindness since his arrival. Nothing overtly friendly, just the occasional acknowledging nod in the hallway or quiet "excuse me" when they crossed paths in the library. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she was absorbed in a thick book, a half-eaten apple beside her. Ethan hesitated, tray in hand. His usual spot was occupied, but the thought of seeking out a new territory in this social minefield made his stomach clench. While he deliberated, Lisa glanced up, caught his eye, and after a moment's consideration, shifted her books to make room, a clear invitation. With cautious relief, Ethan approached and set his tray down across from her. "Thanks," he said simply. Lisa shrugged. "Free country." She returned to her book, something with quantum physics equations on the cover, but added, "The meat surprise isn't actually that surprising once you've been here a while. It's always mysterious grey beef product." Ethan poked at the suspicious mound on his tray and managed a small smile. "I'll keep that in mind." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes until a commotion near the cafeteria entrance drew their attention. Jackson and his entourage had arrived, holding court at their usual center table. The cafeteria's energy shifted perceptibly, students either gravitating toward their table or shrinking into themselves, hoping to avoid notice. "He's such a cliché," Lisa remarked without looking up from her book. "Daddy's the principal, so he thinks he owns the place." Ethan's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Principal Reed is his father?" "Yep. Why do you think he gets away with everything?" "The teachers see nothing, hear nothing. Classic nepotism at its finest." That explained a lot. In his previous school, discipline had been swift and fair. Here it seemed the rules bent around certain students like light around a black hole. Ethan's pondering was interrupted by Jackson's booming voice. "Yo, Chen, making moves on Lisa. Didn't realize she had a thing for dumplings." The cafeteria quieted, all eyes turning toward their corner table. Lisa's cheeks flushed with anger or embarrassment, possibly both, but she kept her eyes firmly on her book. "Ignore him," she muttered. "That's what I do." But Jackson was already approaching, Damon and Tyler flanking him like loyal attack dogs. Ethan instinctively assessed the situation. 3 opponents, confined space, multiple witnesses including cafeteria staff who would undoubtedly report any incident to Principal Reed. Not optimal conditions. "Seriously, Lisa, you can do better," Jackson said, leaning on their table, "unless you've got a fetish for fat martial arts dropouts." "Not everyone bases their worth on how many touchdowns they score, Jackson," Lisa replied coolly, finally looking up. "Some of us value intelligence. You should try it sometime." Jackson's face darkened. "Nobody asked you, nerd." "Nobody asked for your opinion either, but here we are," she shot back. Ethan admired her courage, but recognized the danger signs in Jackson's posture, weight shifting forward, fingers curling, jawline tightening. Classic pre-aggression indicators. "Might want to teach your boyfriend some manners," Jackson said, turning his attention back to Ethan. "Or maybe he only understands Mandarin. Ching chong, am I right?" Several students gasped. Even by Jackson's standards, this was crossing a line. Ethan felt something shift inside him, a familiar heat unfurling in his chest. His hands, resting on the table, slowly curled into fists. "Center yourself. This isn't the place." "I understand you perfectly," Ethan said quietly. "I just don't think you're worth responding to." The cafeteria went dead silent. Jackson's eyes widened, then narrowed dangerously. "What did you just say to me?" "You heard me." Ethan remained seated, his voice calm, even as his heart rate accelerated. "Please leave our table." For a moment it seemed Jackson might actually explode. His face flushed crimson, a vein pulsing visibly at his temple, but then surprisingly he stepped back with a forced laugh. "Whatever. Enjoy your date with the human calculator." He glanced at Ethan's tray. "Better finish your lunch, though. You need to keep up your sumo wrestler physique." With that parting shot, Jackson snatched Ethan's chocolate milk carton and upended it directly over Ethan's tray, flooding his food in brown liquid that quickly spilled over onto Ethan's lap. The cafeteria erupted in cruel laughter as Jackson and his friends sauntered away, high-fiving and mimicking Ethan's shocked expression. Ethan sat very still, feeling the cold milk soaking through his jeans. 8 years of training, of learning to channel emotion into technique, and yet he felt utterly powerless in this moment. "Here," Lisa said quietly, handing him a stack of napkins. "They're jerks. All of them." "Thanks," Ethan managed mechanically, blotting at his jeans while keeping his eyes downcast. The humiliation burned worse than any defeat he'd ever experienced on the mat. At least there the playing field had been even, the rules clear. "It'll get better," Lisa offered, though her tone suggested she didn't entirely believe it herself. Ethan didn't respond. He knew with sudden clarity that it wouldn't get better, not on its own. Something would have to change, and that something was him. The next week passed in a blur of similar incidents. A shoulder check in the hallway that sent Ethan sprawling. His gym clothes mysteriously soaked in the shower during PE. His locker decorated with crude drawings and slurs. Each incident chipped away at his resolve to keep his promise to his parents. No fighting. Focus on school. Make normal friends. But what did normal even mean in this environment? Was it normal to accept daily humiliation? Was it normal to pretend he didn't possess the skills to end this torment with frightening efficiency? On Friday afternoon, Ethan retreated to the school library during study hall, seeking refuge in the quiet stacks. He found a secluded corner and pulled out his phone, opening a chat with his uncle back in Singapore. "How's the American dream, nephew?" his uncle had messaged days ago. Ethan's thumbs hovered over the keyboard. How could he explain that he had gone from respected to ridiculed, that everything he had worked for, everything that had defined him was now locked away like a shameful secret? "It's different," he finally typed. "Dad and Mom want me to be normal here." 3 dots appeared immediately. His uncle was online. Normal is overrated. Be exceptional, always. Ethan smiled despite himself. His uncle had never been one for platitudes. "They made me promise not to fight," Ethan typed. A longer pause this time. Then, "There's a difference between starting fights and finishing them. Honor your parents, but don't dishonor yourself." The words resonated, settling into Ethan's chest with a weight that felt simultaneously heavy and liberating. He tucked his phone away and leaned back against the bookshelf, closing his eyes. When he opened them again, he'd made his decision. That evening, for the first time since moving to America, Ethan cleared space in his bedroom. He pushed the bed against the wall, rolled up the small area rug, and stood in his socks on the hardwood floor. He closed his eyes, took 3 deep, centering breaths. Then, slowly, he began to move. The kata was simple at first. Basic stances, controlled movements, precise footwork. His body remembered what his mind had been trying to suppress. With each position, each transition, he felt more like himself. The movements became more complex, more fluid. A punch that stopped a millimeter from the wall. A kick that whispered through the air. A series of strikes so fast they would have been a blur to an observer. For an hour he trained. No audience, no medals, no validation except the quiet certainty that this controlled power, this disciplined strength, was who he truly was. When he finally stopped, sweat soaking his t-shirt, his mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. He would not seek conflict, but neither would he continue to shrink from it. The weekend passed quietly. Ethan helped his mother with grocery shopping, worked on his physics project, and each evening retreated to his room to train. By Sunday night, he felt the familiar pre-competition calm settling over him. Not anxiety, not anticipation, just a clear-eyed readiness for whatever might come. Monday morning, he chose his clothing carefully, not the usual oversized hoodie, but a simple, fitted black t-shirt and jeans that didn't hide his physique. His mother raised an eyebrow at breakfast but said nothing. As he shouldered his backpack at the front door, his father called out from the kitchen. "Good day at school." "Ethan, remember." "I know." "Dad," Ethan interrupted gently. "No fighting." His father nodded, satisfied, and returned to his coffee. "I won't start anything," Ethan promised silently as he stepped outside. "But I might finish it." The school day began like any other. Classes, whispers, sidelong glances. But something had shifted, if only in Ethan's perception. He walked differently. Not aggressively, but with purpose. He made eye contact. He spoke when called on, his voice clear and steady. In physics, Lisa did a double take when he sat next to her instead of in his usual back row seat. "New look?" she asked, gesturing vaguely at his attire. Ethan shrugged. "Not new, just me." She studied him for a moment, head tilted. "It suits you better than the invisible man routine." Before he could respond, Mr. Peterson called the class to order, launching into a lecture on momentum and force. concepts Ethan understood intimately, though not in the strictly academic sense the teacher was describing. The confrontation, when it came, was almost anticlimactic in its predictability. Lunch period, crowded hallway, Jackson and his cronies lying in wait near Ethan's locker. "Look who decided to shop in the men's department for once," Jackson called out as Ethan approached. "Still looks like a sumo wrestler to me, right guys?" Damon and Tyler laughed on cue, though Ethan noticed Tyler's laugh seemed forced, his eyes darting nervously between Jackson and Ethan. Perhaps he sensed the change, even if he couldn't name it. Ethan stopped a precise 6 feet away from the trio, close enough for conversation, far enough for maneuverability if needed. He said nothing, just waited. Jackson, clearly thrown by this deviation from the script, shifted uncomfortably before doubling down. "What's with the staring, Chen? You got something to say?" "I'm giving you a chance," Ethan said calmly, "to walk away, to find someone else to bother. Or better yet, no one at all." A crowd was forming now, students sensing the unusual tension in the air. Even Damon, not the most perceptive of individuals, seemed to register that something was different. Jackson, however, took Ethan's words as a challenge. "Oh, what? You'll cry to your mommy? Write me a strongly worded letter in Chinese." Ethan sighed. He had tried. He really had. "Last chance, Jackson," he said quietly. "Walk away." Jackson's face contorted with rage at being given an ultimatum in front of his audience. "You know what? I'm done with your attitude." He stepped forward, shoving Ethan hard in the chest. "What are you going to do about it, huh? What are you going to do?" Ethan didn't stumble back. He absorbed the push, his stance solid, his balance perfect. And then, for the first time in weeks, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "That," he said softly, "was a mistake." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion for the gathered students. Jackson threw a wild punch aimed at Ethan's face, a punch that never landed. In one fluid motion, Ethan sidestepped, caught Jackson's wrist and used the bigger boy's momentum to send him careening face first into the lockers with a resounding crash. The hallway went silent. Jackson recovered quickly, spinning around with a roar of outrage. "You're dead, Chen!" He charged like a bull, arms outstretched to grapple. Ethan moved with the practiced precision of someone who had spent thousands of hours honing his craft. A simple redirection of Jackson's charge, a sweep of the legs, and suddenly the star quarterback was lying flat on his back, the wind knocked out of him, staring up at the fluorescent lights in bewilderment. Damon, loyal to a fault, rushed forward. Next, he was bigger, stronger, but infinitely slower. Ethan ducked under his wild swing, delivered 2 lightning-fast strikes to pressure points in Damon's arm, and watched as the larger boy's limb went temporarily numb, hanging uselessly at his side. "What the hell?" Damon gasped, clutching his tingling arm. Tyler wisely took a step back, hands raised in surrender. "I don't want any trouble," he stammered. The gathered crowd was dead silent, eyes wide, phones forgotten in hands that had meant to record just another bullying incident, but had instead captured something far more unexpected. Jackson struggled to his feet, his face a mask of humiliation and rage. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he spat. Ethan stood relaxed but ready, his breathing even, his stance balanced. "I'm the person who's been asking you politely to leave me alone for weeks. You didn't listen." "This isn't over," Jackson growled, though he made no move to attack again, his body language betraying new uncertainty. "It is over," Ethan replied firmly. "Find someone else to target. Better yet, find something better to do with your time than making other people miserable. I'm done being your punching bag." A slow, incredulous clapping started somewhere. In the crowd, others joined in, the applause spreading, punctuated by a few cheers and whistles. Ethan didn't react to it, keeping his eyes fixed on Jackson, watching for any sign of another attack. But Jackson, despite his bravado, seemed to recognize he was outmatched. With a final, venomous glare, he backed away. "My father will hear about this," he threatened. "I'm sure he will," Ethan acknowledged calmly. "Tell him everything, how you've been harassing me for weeks. How you threw the first punch today. I'm happy to have that conversation." The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period. Slowly, reluctantly, the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with excited chatter. Jackson slunk away, followed by Damon, who was still shaking his arm, trying to restore feeling. Tyler hesitated, then mumbled what might have been an apology before, hurrying after his friends. As students filed past Ethan to their classes, many nodded respectfully or offered tentative smiles. A few clapped him on the shoulder. Lisa appeared at his side, her expression a mix of shock and admiration. "That was," she began, then shook her head, apparently at a loss for words. "Where did you learn to do that?" Ethan opened his locker, calmly exchanging his morning textbooks for afternoon ones. Singapore. I trained in mixed martial arts for 8 years, won some tournaments. Some tournaments, Lisa repeated faintly. Right, just some tournaments. And you've been letting Jackson push you around because I promised my parents a fresh start, no fighting. Ethan closed his locker and turned to her with a rueful smile. I tried to keep that promise. But now? Now I'm just being myself. He shouldered his backpack. We should get to class, don't want to be late. As they walked down the rapidly emptying hallway, Lisa glanced sideways at him. You know this changes everything, right? By tomorrow, everyone in school will know. Ethan nodded. He knew. Part of him felt guilty for breaking his promise, but a larger part felt like he could finally breathe again after weeks of slowly suffocating. My dad always says that respect has to be earned, he said after a moment. I tried earning it by being quiet and respectful. That didn't work, so I had to show them another way. Lisa considered this, then nodded. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. And you didn't hurt them, not really, you just made your point. Ethan smiled. That was the idea. As predicted, the story spread like wildfire through Westridge High. By final period, Ethan had received dozens of curious stares, several thumbs up from students he'd never spoken to, and had overheard at least 3 dramatically embellished versions of the hallway incident. In one retelling, he had supposedly knocked Jackson unconscious with a roundhouse kick. The summons to Principal Reed's office came during last period, delivered by a nervous-looking office aide. Ethan had been expecting it. He gathered his things, nodded reassuringly to Lisa, and followed the aide through hushed hallways. Principal Reed was waiting behind his imposing oak desk, his expression severe. Jackson sat in one of the visitor chairs, a sullen scowl on his face. Mr. Chen, Principal Reed began without preamble, I understand there was an altercation today involving you and several other students. Would you care to explain? Ethan stood straight, hands clasped behind his back. Yes, sir. After weeks of harassment, I defended myself when Jackson physically assaulted me in the hallway. He pushed me, then attempted to punch me. I subdued him using the minimum force necessary. Jackson made a choking sound. That's not. I'm speaking to Mr. Chen at the moment. Principal Reed cut him off, his tone unexpectedly sharp. He returned, his attention to Ethan. You're new here, so perhaps you're unaware that physical altercations of any kind are grounds for suspension. I understand, sir, Ethan replied calmly. I accept whatever consequences you deem appropriate. I would only ask that you also address the ongoing bullying that led to this situation. Principal Reed's eyebrows rose. Bullying? That's a serious accusation. It's also true, came a voice from the doorway. Lisa stood there, tablet in hand. And I have evidence. Principal Reed frowned. Miss Nguyen, this is a private meeting. With her respect, sir, it shouldn't be. Lisa stepped into the office uninvited. I have video documentation of Jackson and his friends harassing Ethan on multiple occasions over the past 3 weeks. I've compiled it all here. She placed the tablet on the desk, including today's incident, which clearly shows Jackson initiating the physical confrontation. Jackson's face paled. You've been recording us? Not me personally, Lisa clarified. But between security cameras and about 30 students with phones, you're practically a social media star. Not in a good way. Principal Reed's expression had grown increasingly troubled as he swiped through the videos. Ethan caught glimpses of familiar scenes. The cafeteria milk incident, hallway shoves, locker vandalism, all captured from various angles on students' phones. I see, Principal Reed said finally, his voice carefully controlled. He looked up at his son. Jackson, wait outside, please. But Dad, now. Jackson slouched out of the office, throwing a venomous glare at Ethan and Lisa as he passed. Once the door closed, Principal Reed sighed heavily and removed his glasses. Mr. Chen, Miss Nguyen, I want to be very clear. Violence is never the answer in my school, regardless of provocation. With respect, sir, Ethan replied. Sometimes it's the only answer people like Jackson understand. The principal replaced, his glasses studying Ethan with new interest. Your file mentions you recently moved here from Singapore. It doesn't mention martial arts training. It wasn't relevant to my academic record, sir. A ghost of a smile touched Principal Reed's lips. Indeed. He tapped the tablet thoughtfully. Here's what's going to happen. You, Mr. Chen, will serve 1 day of detention for fighting on school grounds. That's non-negotiable. Ethan nodded. Acceptance. As for Jackson and his friends, Principal Reed's expression hardened. They will face more significant consequences for what appears to be a pattern of harassment. I'll also be having a very long conversation with my son at home tonight. Thank you, sir, Lisa said, retrieving her tablet. Principal Reed fixed them both with a stern look. Don't mistake my fairness for weakness. If either of you are involved in any further physical altercations, the consequences will be severe. Is that understood? Yes, sir, they chorused. Good, Miss Nguyen, you may go. Mr. Chen, a moment more, please. Lisa shot Ethan an encouraging look before slipping out of the office. When the door closed behind her, Principal Reed leaned back in his chair, his official demeanor softening slightly. Off the record, Mr. Chen, that was some impressive technique. Very controlled. Ethan blinked in surprise. Thank you, sir. I wrestled in college, the principal explained. Not quite the same as your training, obviously, but I recognize discipline when I see it. He leaned forward again. Which is why I'm going to suggest an alternative to having this on your permanent record. Sir, our wrestling team could use someone with your two skills. Coach Bennett has been complaining about lack of talent for years. What do you say? Channel some of that energy in a constructive direction? Ethan considered the offer. His parents had forbidden tournaments and fighting but a school sport. That might be acceptable, more than acceptable. It might be a way to be himself without breaking his promise. I'd like that, sir. Thank you. Principal Reed nodded briskly, his official manner returning. Good. Report to detention tomorrow, then see Coach Bennett after school. And Mr. Chen? Yes, sir. While I cannot condone how you handled this situation, sometimes standing up for yourself is necessary. Just find a better way to do it next time. Ethan left the office feeling lighter than he had in weeks. In the hallway, Lisa was waiting, a triumphant smile on her face. Detention? She asked. Just one day, Ethan confirmed. And he's putting me on the wrestling team. Lisa laughed. Of course he is. Reed's a former wrestler himself, probably recognized talent when he saw it. She fell into step beside him as they headed toward the exit. So, international martial arts champion, huh? Any other secrets I should know about? Ethan smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. Not a champion anymore, just a regular high school student trying to fit in. Hate to break it to you, Lisa said, gesturing to where students in the hallway were pointing and whispering as they passed, but fitting in might be off the table now. You're officially the most interesting person at Westridge High. If, to confirm her words, a freshman boy approached them tentatively. Excuse me, he said, his voice cracking with adolescent nervousness. Are you the guy who beat up Jackson Reed? That was awesome, man. He's been making my life hell all year. Before Ethan could respond, another student joined them and then another, each with similar stories of intimidation and relief that someone had finally stood up to the school's resident tyrant. Ethan listened to them all, increasingly aware that what he had done wasn't just about defending his own honor. He had inadvertently become a symbol of resistance to a culture of bullying that had gone unchecked for too long. That evening, as Ethan sat at the dinner table watching his parents exchange concerned glances over the detention notice he'd brought home, he felt an odd sense of peace. Just one incident and already fighting, his father said, disappointment heavy in his voice. Ethan, we talked about this. They started it, Ethan said simply. I finished it, and now I'm on the wrestling team. His mother's eyebrows shot up. Wrestling? But your promise was not to fight or enter tournaments, Ethan completed. This is a school sport, Mum. It's normal. He smiled faintly at the word. Isn't that what you wanted? His parents exchanged another look, this one less certain. I tried it your way, Ethan continued quietly. I really did. But pretending to be someone I'm not wasn't working. I can't forget 8 years of training just because we moved to a new country. His father sighed deeply, but there was a hint of understanding in his eyes. No more fighting outside of official school activities, he said firmly. That's the new rule. Ethan nodded solemnly. I can live with that. Later, alone in his room, Ethan messaged his uncle. Found a middle path, wrestling team. The response came quickly. Proud of you. Balance in all things. Balance. That was what had been missing these past weeks. Trying to be only half of himself, the quiet, studious half, while suppressing the disciplined fighter, had left him perpetually off-kilter. The next day at school, everything had changed. Jackson and his friends were conspicuously subdued, giving Ethan a wide berth in the hallways. Other students nodded respectfully or smiled as he passed. A few even approached to talk, curious about his background or the martial arts he practiced. During lunch, Ethan found himself surrounded by a small group at what had previously been his and Lisa's isolated corner table. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and questions about Singapore. Is it true you can get fined for chewing gum there? Someone asked. And caned for spray painting? Another chimed in. Ethan found himself explaining the nuances of Singaporean law and culture to an attentive audience. It felt good to talk about home, to share that part of himself without shame or hesitation. Lisa caught his eye across the table and gave him a thumbs up. This is what belonging feels like, he realized. Not blending in, not disappearing, but being accepted for who you truly are. After school, Ethan reported to Coach Bennett in the gymnasium. The wrestling coach, a compact, muscular man with a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, looked him up and down skeptically. "Principal Reed says you've got skills," he said without preamble. "Show me." For the next hour, Ethan demonstrated techniques, executed takedowns on assistant coaches, and explained the principles of the various martial arts he had studied. By the end, Coach Bennett was grinning broadly. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, clapping Ethan on the shoulder. Reed wasn't exaggerating for once. "You're the real deal, kid. Welcome to the team." As Ethan was leaving the gym, he nearly collided with Jackson, who was emerging from the locker room in football gear. Both boys froze, sizing each other up in the narrow hallway. Jackson's usual swagger was noticeably diminished, his eyes wary. "Chen," he acknowledged stiffly. "Reed," Ethan replied with a nod. A tense silence stretched between them. Finally, Jackson spoke, his voice low and grudging. "That thing you did with my arm, where'd you learn that?" 8 years of training, Ethan said simply. 3 different disciplines. Jackson absorbed this, then nodded slowly. "Coach says you're joining the wrestling team." "That's right." "Well, and good luck with that, I guess." It wasn't an apology, not even close, but it was an acknowledgement. A small step toward, if not friendship, then at least peaceful coexistence. "Thanks," Ethan said. "Good luck with football." As Jackson brushed past him to head to practice, Ethan felt the last of the tension he'd been carrying since moving to America finally release. He had found his balance, his way forward, not by hiding who he was, not by becoming someone else's victim, but by standing firm in his own identity. Outside the school, Lisa was waiting by the bike rack. "How'd it go with Coach Bennett?" she asked as Ethan approached. "I'm officially on the team," he confirmed with a smile. "First meet is in 2 weeks." "I'll be there," she promised, then hesitated. "I was thinking, there's a good bubble tea place downtown, very authentic according to my cousin who visited Taiwan last year. Want to check it out?" Ethan's smile widened. "Absolutely. I've been craving good boba for weeks." As they walked away from Westridge High, Ethan glanced back at the sprawling brick building that had, just days ago, felt like a prison. Now, for the first time, it felt like it might eventually become something else, a home. Not because he had changed to fit it, but because he had finally allowed it to see him as he truly was. Sometimes, he thought, the only way to find your place is to stand your ground. Now, what's your opinion about this story? Leave a comment, as we'd love to read it. Also, I'd like to ask for your support by subscribing to the channel. Your subscription means a lot to me and helps me a great deal, so please subscribe, so we can keep bringing you content like this. And it's not over yet. Another emotional story like this one is playing on your screen right now. Click on it. I'm waiting for you.